In the grand, somber theater of criminal history, we usually reserve the spotlight for the geniuses, the D.B. Coopers, the suave Ocean's 11 archetypes who vanish into the night with diamonds and dignity. But today, we turn the camera toward the other end of the spectrum. We are descending into the murky, chaotic underworld of the statistically challenged. These are not the architects of perfect crimes. These are the unwitting pioneers of the perfect failure. From disguises drawn with office supplies to getaway vehicles that require pedaling, we are about to explore 50 case studies of human judgment gone joyously, catastrophically wrong. 1. The Facebook Felon. In the digital age, we leave footprints everywhere, but usually those footprints are metaphorical. For a burglar in Pennsylvania, the urge to check his social status proved stronger than the urge to escape. After breaking into a home and securing a few valuables, he yielded to a modern addiction. He logged into his Facebook account on the victim's computer. Perhaps he wanted to post a status update about his sudden influx of wealth. The tragedy? He forgot to log out. The homeowner returned to find the thief's profile smiling back from the monitor, a digital calling card that made the subsequent police investigation the shortest in precinct history. It serves as a grim reminder. If you're going to rob a house, maybe wait until you're home to check your likes. 2. The Paystub Paper Trail. There is a specific kind of bureaucratic irony in using your own employment records to commit a felony. In California, a man walked into a bank intent on robbery. He needed paper for his threatening note, and in a moment of unparalleled thriftiness, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his own pay stub. He scribbled, "Give me the money" on the back, completely ignoring that his full legal name, home address, and social security number were printed on the front. He handed this dossier of self-incrimination to the teller. Detectives didn't even have to dust for fingerprints. They simply drove to the address listed under employee residence and waited for him to come home from his shift. 3. The Butt Dial Confession. Silence is golden, especially when you are actively committing a burglary. 2 enterprising thieves in Oklahoma, however, failed to observe this golden rule. Amidst the adrenaline of their heist, one of the perpetrators sat on his phone, inadvertently triggering a pocket dial to 911. The emergency dispatcher stayed on the line, treated to a live, high-fidelity audio broadcast of the entire crime. The police were able to triangulate the signal and listen to the thieves discuss their location and inventory in real time. It was less of a manhunt and more of a coordinated rendezvous, with the criminals providing the turn-by-turn navigation for their own arrest. 4. The Selfie Incrimination. Vanity is a sin, but in the criminal underworld, it's a liability. A burglar in Texas executed what could have been a clean job, vanishing into the night with his loot. However, in his haste, he left behind his smartphone. The police unlocked the device to find not just contacts, but a camera roll filled with selfies taken at the crime scene, posing with the stolen goods. It was a portfolio of guilt, curated by the criminal himself. To add insult to injury, the phone received a text from his mother during the investigation, asking where he was. The police were kind enough to answer the call and let her know exactly where he was headed. 5. The Job Application Heist. Ambition is generally a positive trait, but timing is everything. A woman in Illinois decided to shoplift from a department store, a standard petty crime. However, prior to stuffing merchandise into her bag, she had stopped at the customer service desk to fill out a job application. She provided her real name, her real phone number, and her real address, presumably hoping for a career in retail. The manager, upon witnessing the theft on security cameras, simply pulled her fresh application from the pile and handed it to the police. It remains the only known instance where a criminal record and a resume were submitted simultaneously. 6. The PBiJ Sleeper Agent. Adrenaline usually keeps a criminal sharp, but apparently the carbohydrate crash is a more powerful force. A man in Kentucky broke into a house, intending to sweep the place for valuables. Instead, he found the kitchen. After preparing himself a generous peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the comforts of home proved too seductive. He sat on the couch to eat, dozed off, and was discovered the next morning by the homeowner. The police arrived to find him snoring, the half-eaten evidence of his midnight snack still in hand. It takes a special kind of nonchalance to treat a crime scene like an Airbnb. 7. The Bubble Bath Bandit. If the Kentucky sandwich eater was relaxed, a burglar in Nevada was practically on vacation. After breaking into a residence, he didn't just stop for a snack. He decided to utilize the amenities. He drew a warm bubble bath, poured a glass of the homeowner's wine, and donned a silk robe he found in the closet. The level of relaxation was so profound that he fell asleep in the tub. The homeowner returned to find a stranger marinating in their bathroom. When the police arrived, they had to allow him to dry off before cuffing him, turning a breaking and entering charge into a humiliating spa day intervention. 8. The Massage Chair Trap. In an Ohio home invasion, the intruder stumbled upon the holy grail of living room furniture, a high-end leather massage recliner. Overcome by curiosity, or perhaps chronic back pain, he sat down to test the merchandise. He activated the shiatsu setting, and the rhythmic kneading did its job too well. The vibrations lulled him into a deep, comatose slumber. The homeowners returned to find the thief passed out cold, drooling onto the leather while the chair continued its mechanical cycle. He had essentially been incapacitated by comfort, trapped by the very loot he intended to steal. 9. The Bean Betrayal. Biology can be a cruel mistress, particularly when stealth is required. A man in Louisiana broke into a home and, upon hearing the residents' return, dove into a closet to hide. It was the perfect concealment, except for one dietary detail. He had consumed a massive plate of beans shortly before the break-in. In the silence of the bedroom, his digestive system betrayed him with an auditory and olfactory assault that was impossible to ignore. The homeowner, assuming a sewage leak or a dying animal, called the police. Officers opened the closet to find the world's most embarrassed burglar, defeated by his own metabolism. 10. The Uber Getaway. Cardio is the first rule of Zombieland, and it should be the first rule of burglary. A perpetrator in Georgia, having botched a robbery, fled the scene on foot. However, the physical exertion quickly proved too much for him. Gasping for air and clutching his side, he flagged down a passing car which happened to be an Uber. He treated the rideshare like a getaway vehicle, directing the driver to his home address. The driver, blissfully unaware, dropped him off right where the police, having tracked the clearly exhausted man, were waiting. His rating as a passenger remains unknown, but his rating as a fugitive dropped to 0. 11. The Sharpie Mask. We move now to the Department of Visual Effects. An Ohio man, lacking a ski mask or a stocking, decided to improvise a disguise using a permanent black marker. He drew large, uneven circles around his eyes and shaded his cheeks, resembling a raccoon drawn by a toddler. He genuinely believed this ink application rendered him unrecognizable. The reality, of course, was that he had made himself the most distinctive-looking person in the state. The police found him later in his car, furiously scrubbing his face with Mountain Dew, trying to erase the evidence. The ink, like his criminal record, was permanent. 12. The Transparent Bag Technique. In Florida, the spiritual home of bizarre crime, a man attempted to rob a convenience store using a plastic grocery bag as a mask. The flaw in his logic was transparency. He chose a clear bag. Not only was his face perfectly visible to the security cameras and the clerk, but he had also neglected to cut air holes. Mid-robbery, the physics of suffocation kicked in. He passed out from oxygen deprivation, collapsing in front of the counter. The clerk didn't even have to fight him. He simply stepped over the unconscious body and called the authorities to collect the trash. 13. The Name Tag Negligence. Corporate branding is important, but there is a time and place for it. A man decided to rob a fast food restaurant, a bold move in itself. However, he did so immediately after his shift at a completely different job, while still wearing his uniform. And on that uniform sat a bright, legible name tag. The victim didn't need to describe the suspect's height or build. They just told the police it was Kevin from the auto shop. His boss was called, and the thief was fired and arrested in the same afternoon. It was a masterclass in professional misconduct. 14. The Cardboard Box Caper. Drawing inspiration from Metal Gear Solid but lacking the tactical execution, A man in Alabama fashioned a helmet out of a cardboard moving box. He cut eye holes, placed the box over his head, and entered a store. The problem with a box is the severe restriction of peripheral vision. The security footage captured a tragic comedy of the man colliding with shelves, knocking over displays, and spinning in circles completely disoriented. By the time the police arrived, he was effectively trapped in a labyrinth of his own making, a box-headed minotaur waiting to be led away. 15. The Mannequin Man. In Arizona, a thief decided on a strategy of extreme patience. He entered a department store before closing and positioned himself in the window display, posing as a mannequin. The plan was to wait until the staff locked up and left. He stood perfectly still for hours. The plan unraveled when a security guard on patrol noticed that one of the mannequins was sweating profusely and trembling from muscle fatigue. When the guard tapped on the glass, the statue shrieked, bolted, and ran face first into the automatic doors, knocking himself unconscious. It was performance art with a tragic finale. 16. The Manual Transmission Tragedy. The American automotive landscape has shifted to automatic, a fact that has saved more cars from theft than any alarm system. A thief in Florida successfully hotwired a vehicle in a parking lot, ready for a high-speed exit. The universe threw a wrench in the gears. The car was a stick shift. Security cameras watched as the car lurched, stalled, bunny-hopped, and stalled again. After 5 minutes of grinding the clutch and moving a total of 3 feet, the thief abandoned the vehicle in frustration and fled on foot. He was defeated not by the police, but by a third pedal. 17. The Lawnmower Chase. The concept of a getaway vehicle implies speed. A man in Texas, however, had to work with what he had: a riding lawnmower with a top speed of 5 miles per hour. After stealing from a local store, he merged onto the main road on his John Deere, engine roaring, moving at a pace that can only be described as leisurely. Police cruisers pulled up behind him with lights flashing. The chase lasted 10 minutes, not because he was evasive, but because the officers were laughing too hard to intervene immediately. One officer eventually stepped out of his car and simply walked alongside the mower to turn off the key. 18. The Stationary Bike Escape. In a moment that defies all logic, a thief in California snatched a bicycle from a fitness display outside a gym. He mounted the bike and began to pedal furiously, expecting to zoom away. The bike, however, was a stationary exercise model, bolted firmly to a heavy metal stand. Bystanders stopped to watch a man pedaling for his life, veins popping, going absolutely nowhere. It was a Sisyphean nightmare come to life. By the time he realized the bike wasn't mobile, he was too exhausted from his workout to run from the approaching officers. 19. The Test Drive Fail. A man in a motorcycle showroom decided he didn't want to pay for a new bike. He wanted to steal it. He hopped onto a display model, ignited the engine, and gunned the throttle, aiming for the glass front doors. He neglected to account for the friction of polished showroom tile. The bike's tires spun, caught traction violently, and launched him not through the door but sideways into a row of other motorcycles, creating a domino effect of destruction. He was found pinned under 3 different bikes, bruised, and very much under arrest. 20. The Equine Dilemma. In rural Oregon, a fleeing suspect needed an exit strategy and spotted a horse tied to a post. Thinking he was in a Western movie, he untied the animal and jumped on its back, yelling, "Giddy up!" The horse, loyal only to its owner and confused by the stranger, stood statue still. The suspect tried kicking, pleading, and whispering to the animal. The horse merely chewed grass. The police officers strolled up to the scene to find the man still sitting on the horse, arguing with it. He was arrested in the saddle, proving that horsepower means nothing without cooperation. 21. The Chimney Choke. Santa Claus makes it look easy, but for a thief in California, the chimney was a one-way ticket to humiliation. Attempting to bypass the alarm system, he lowered himself down the flue. He failed to account for the narrowing architecture of modern fireplaces. He became hopelessly wedged just above the hearth, unable to move up or down. He spent 12 hours in the soot before the homeowner heard muffled weeping coming from the walls. The fire department had to dismantle the masonry to extract him, a localized demolition that cost more than anything he could have possibly stolen. 22. The ceiling drop. In Texas, a fugitive running from the police inside a precinct building decided to crawl into the ventilation ducts, a classic movie trope. Reality, however, has gravity. The aluminum ductwork was not designed to support the weight of a grown man. As he crawled over the interrogation room, the metal sheared, and he crashed through the ceiling tiles, landing directly on the table in front of two detectives. The dust settled. Staring at the stunned officers, he didn't even try to run. He just groaned and accepted the handcuffs. It was the most dramatic entry into custody on record. 23. The Skylight Boomerang. Physics can be slapstick. A burglar attempting a rooftop entry via skylight miscalculated his trajectory. He leaped onto the glass, expecting it to shatter or open. Instead, he bounced. But he didn't just bounce. He lost his footing and tumbled backward off the roof, falling 2 stories, directly into an open window of the same house. He landed in a filled bathtub. The homeowner found him soaking wet, bruised, and confused about how he had successfully broken in while simultaneously failing so spectacularly. 24. The Drive-Thru Dangler. In Alabama, a fast food robber tried to exit via the drive-thru window. It's a small aperture, usually reserved for bags of burgers. As he shimmied torso first out the window, his belt loop snagged on the handle of the fryer station. He was left dangling upside down, half in and half out, kicking his legs in the cool night air while his upper body hung over the kitchen floor. The employees, rather than helping, simply finished their cleaning duties and waited for the police to unhook him like a prize fish. 25. The ATM Drag. Ambition often exceeds capability. A gang of thieves in Kentucky decided to steal an entire standalone ATM. They wrapped a chain around the machine and tied it to the bumper of their truck. They floored it. The ATM ripped loose, but it didn't slide gracefully. It was a massive block of concrete and steel being dragged down a residential street, creating a shower of sparks and a screeching noise that woke the entire neighborhood. They managed to drag the anchor 3 blocks before their rear axle snapped under the strain. They were found trying to push a broken truck with a bank machine still tied to it. 26. The Karate Dojo Mistake. Location, location, location. A man in Washington searched for a target and settled on a business with an open door. He stormed in, waving a weapon, demanding cash. He had walked into a karate dojo. And not during a children's beginner class, but during a black belt sparring session. The sensei and his students didn't even panic. They looked at him as a training opportunity. Within seconds, the thief was disarmed, swept to the floor, and placed in a joint lock that was both painful and humiliating. He was held in a pretzel formation until the police arrived to rescue him. 27. The Police Fundraiser Fiasco. In Michigan, a man attempted a snatch and grab of a cash box at a community hall. He ran in, grabbed the box, and turned to flee. He froze when he looked up. The event was a fundraiser for the local police benevolent association. The room was filled with over 50 off-duty officers, the police chief, and a K-9 unit eating dinner. The silence that followed was deafening. He slowly placed the box back on the table and raised his hands, realizing he had just walked into the safest room in America to be a victim and the most dangerous room to be a criminal. 28. The Gun Store. Glitch. A similar error in judgment occurred in Texas, where a man attempted to rob a store specializing in firearms and hunting gear. He pulled a pistol and yelled for the register to be opened. He failed to realize that the customers in a Texas gun store are, by definition, armed. Almost in unison, 4 customers and the clerk drew their own weapons. Facing a firing squad of 5 law-abiding citizens, the robber's confidence evaporated. He dropped his gun, put his hands up, and nervously asked, "So, are we good?" The clerk replied, "Oh, we're real good." 29. The Parole Officer Reunion. A burglar in New York picked a random apartment to toss. He kicked in the door and began rummaging through the living room. Then he saw a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. He froze. It was a picture of a man he knew very well, his own parole officer. In a twist of cosmic irony, he had broken into the home of the one person whose job was to monitor his behavior. He fled, but the parole officer recognized him on the hallway security camera immediately. The next scheduled meeting was moved up to right now in a holding cell. 30. The Card Swipe Surprise. In Ohio, a thief broke into a parked car and stole a wallet. Seeing a coffee shop across the street, he immediately went to use the credit card. He ordered a latte and handed over the card. The barista looked at the name, looked at the customer in line behind the thief, and said, "Hey, Officer Miller, isn't this your card?" The thief turned around to see the uniformed owner of the wallet standing right behind him, waiting for his own coffee. The officer simply tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You'll take that back, and the coffee is on you." 31. The Popcorn Bag Heist. In Texas, a bank robber forgot a crucial piece of equipment, a bag for the money. Thinking quickly but poorly, he dumped out a large bag of movie theater popcorn he was eating and slammed the greasy sack on the counter. The teller complied, filling it with heavy coin rolls and stacks of bills. As he ran toward the exit, the butter-soaked paper bottom of the bag disintegrated. The loot crashed to the floor, scattering coins everywhere. He spent a few pathetic seconds trying to scoop up loose change before hearing sirens and deciding to cut his losses. 32. The Banana Blunder. Weaponry is hard to come by, so a man in Alabama improvised. He put a banana in his pocket and pointed it through the fabric, simulating a gun. He marched into a liquor store and threatened the clerk. The clerk, skeptical of the gun's curvature, hesitated. In the heat of the moment, the thief pulled the weapon out to demonstrate his seriousness. The sight of a bruising yellow fruit did not inspire terror. The clerk actually laughed, grabbed the banana, peeled it, and took a bite. The thief, stripped of his potassium-rich leverage, fled the store in shame. 33. The Steak Dinner Delay. Gluttony is a sin that strikes at inconvenient times. A burglar broke into a restaurant after hours, intending to empty the safe. However, the sight of the professional kitchen was too tempting. He fired up the grill and began cooking himself a filet mignon. He was so engrossed in getting the perfect sear on his steak that he didn't hear the silent alarm. Police found him plating his meal. He never got to take the first bite, but he did get a meal provided by the county jail later that night. 34. The Karaoke Criminal. In a bar in Texas, a thief grabbed a handful of cash from the tip jar. Instead of running, the adrenaline apparently triggered a need for performance. The karaoke machine was playing Bon Jovi's Livin' on a prayer. He grabbed the microphone and began belting out the chorus, basking in the attention of the crowd. He was halfway through the second verse when the bouncer and an off-duty cop unplugged the machine and escorted him off stage. He didn't make halfway there, he didn't make it anywhere. 35. The Clock Watcher. A burglar in California broke into a high-end antique shop specializing in rare clocks. He was a lover of horology, apparently, because instead of stealing, he became mesmerized. He spent hours winding the clocks, examining the gears, and adjusting the pendulums. He lost track of time in a shop literally filled with devices that measure it. The owner arrived the next morning to open the shop and found the burglar still there, monologuing to himself about escapement mechanisms. He was arrested for burglary and extreme nerdiness. 36. The Parrot Snitch. Animals are terrible accomplices. A thief broke into a pet shop thinking it would be an easy score. He didn't account for the resident macaw, a bird with a large vocabulary and a bad attitude. As the thief filled his bag, the parrot began screaming, "Stop it, and I see you." The thief, panicked by the disembodied voice, started shouting back at the bird, "Shut up!" The shouting match between man and avian grew so loud that a passerby heard the commotion and called the police. The bird was credited as the primary whistleblower in the police report. 37. The Great Dane. Sit-in. In Texas, a man crawled through a large doggy door to enter a home. He emerged into the kitchen, right under the nose of the homeowner's 150-pound Great Dane. The dog was not aggressive. It was simply needy. It knocked the intruder down and sat on his chest, demanding belly rubs. The dog was so heavy that the man couldn't breathe, let alone escape. He lay pinned under the affectionate beast for 20 minutes until the homeowner woke up, came downstairs, and called the cops to remove the human toy his dog had found. 38. The Swamp Thing. A fleeing suspect in Florida decided to lose the cops by wading into a murky swamp. His plan was to submerge himself in the mud like a commando. He forgot that Florida swamps are inhabited. Moments after settling into the muck, the water around him began to churn. An 11-foot alligator surfaced, curious about the new snack. The suspect burst from the water, running toward the police officers with his hands up, screaming, "Arrest me! Please arrest me!" The cops noted that nature had effectively conducted the interrogation. 39. The Tree Squirrel Tumble. In Oregon, a fugitive climbed a dense oak tree to hide from a K-9 unit. He was effectively hidden in the canopy, high above the search party. He was undone by a territorial squirrel. The rodent, unhappy with the intruder, jumped onto the man's face. Startled, the fugitive swatted at the squirrel, lost his balance, and fell 20 feet, landing in a decorative bush directly in front of the police chief. The squirrel remained at large, the man did not. 40. The Lobster Pants. Shoplifting requires discreet concealment. Frozen lobsters are neither discreet nor comfortable. A man in a Florida grocery store shoved 2 frozen lobster tails down the front of his pants. As he walked toward the exit, the extreme cold began to react with sensitive anatomy. He started walking like a cowboy who had ridden for 3 days straight. Then, as the ice melted, the lobsters twitched. Muscle spasms. He screamed, ripped his pants down in the middle of the frozen food aisle, and surrendered to the sheer discomfort of the situation. 41. The Door, Push, Pull Paradox. Robbing a bank is high stakes. Operating a door shouldn't be. A thief in Michigan, clutching a bag of cash, ran full tilt toward the exit. The door was clearly labeled Pull. In his panic, he pushed. When the door didn't open, he backed up and rammed it with his shoulder. It still didn't open. He spent 30 agonizing seconds battering himself against a functioning door while the tellers watched in pity. Finally, an elderly woman entering the bank pulled the door open from the outside, and he tumbled into the arms of the arriving police. 42. The Name Game. In Georgia, a man pulled a ski mask over his face and demanded cash from a convenience store clerk. The clerk narrowed his eyes and said, "Steve, is that you?" The robber froze. The clerk continued, "Steve, I recognize your voice and you're wearing your varsity jacket with Steve embroidered on the chest." Defeated, Steve pulled off the mask and mumbled, "I was just joking." He tried to leave, but the betrayal of anonymity was total. The police picked him up at his house, which the clerk also knew the directions to. 43. The Apologetic Robber. Some people just aren't cut out for a life of crime. A would-be robber in Tennessee entered a store, gun drawn, but started shaking violently from nerves. He began to cry. He apologized to the clerk, put the gun away, and then, in a moment of pure confusion, asked if he could buy a scratch-off lottery ticket. The clerk, bewildered, sold him the ticket. The man scratched it, lost, and walked out, waiting by his car for the police to arrive because he felt he deserved it. It was the most polite felony in state history. 44. The Grease Trap. A thief in Oregon, hearing sirens, looked for a hiding spot behind a fast food joint. He saw a large metal bin and hopped in. It was the grease disposal dumpster. It was semi-full of lukewarm, viscous frying oil. The sides were slick with sludge, meaning once he slid in, he couldn't climb out. He spent the night marinating in rancid fat until the morning crew came out to dump trash and found a shiny, slippery, and incredibly smelly man shouting for help. The fire department had to hose him down before he could even be put in the squad car. 45. The Frozen Lock-In. In Ohio, a man broke into a bakery looking for the cash box. He thought it might be hidden in the walk-in freezer. He stepped inside, and the heavy door clicked shut behind him. It was an older model without an internal release. He was trapped in sub-zero temperatures. He spent the night doing jumping jacks and eating frozen cookie dough to stay alive. When the baker opened the freezer at 4:00 a.m., the thief stumbled out, eyebrows frosted, shivering so violently he couldn't even run. He was literally and figuratively frozen at the scene. 46. The Monitor Test. A burglar in Texas broke into a home and spotted a massive flat-screen TV. He unhooked it, intending to steal it. But then, curiosity struck. "I wonder how good the picture remains," he surely thought. He plugged it back in, sat on the sofa, and turned on a movie. He became so engrossed in the film that he didn't hear the garage door open. The homeowners walked into the living room to find a stranger eating their snacks and watching their Netflix. He shushed them because the movie was at a good part. The police let him finish the scene before taking him in. 47. The Bounce House Bust. A fleeing suspect in Florida ran through a backyard where a child's birthday party was in full swing. To hide, he zipped himself inside a large inflatable bounce house. The police arrived, scanning the yard. Then, they saw the castle vibrating. The suspect was inside, bouncing uncontrollably every time he tried to stand up. The officers unzipped the entrance and the fugitive tumbled out, dizzy and surrounded by confused 6-year-olds. It was a colorful end to a gray day. 48. The Stilt Walker. In Washington, a shoplifter at a costume store decided that the best way to steal a pair of drywall stilts was to wear them out. He strapped the 3-foot extenders to his legs and wobbled out the door. Escaping on stilts is not efficient. He covered about 20 feet in 5 minutes looking like an intoxicated giraffe. He eventually hit a pothole, toppled over like a felled tree, and lay tangled in the aluminum legs until police arrived. He couldn't get up, and they couldn't stop laughing long enough to help him. 49. The Porta-Potty Blue. Hiding in a portable toilet is an act of desperation. Hiding in the tank of a portable toilet is an act of madness. A suspect in Arizona, cornered at a construction site, squeezed himself into the holding tank of a porta-potty to avoid capture. The liquid is blue, filled with strong chemicals, and other things. The police didn't even have to look for him. They heard the splashing. They tipped the unit over to pour him out. He emerged dyed entirely blue, looking like a rejected Smurf who had seen too much. 50. The Gasoline Sip. Finally, we have the chemistry major. A man in Ohio wanted to steal gasoline from a police cruiser parked in a lot. He brought a hose and a gas can. He inserted the hose into the tank and sucked on the end to start the siphon. However, he sucked too hard and swallowed a mouthful of unleaded fuel. He immediately began choking, vomiting, and writhing on the ground. The officers inside the station watched the security feed of a man poisoning himself on their property. They walked out, called an ambulance, and charged him with theft, though his stomach had already punished him enough. The verdict. In the end, these stories serve as a comforting reminder. We often fear the criminal underworld as a sophisticated network of masterminds, but the reality is often just a guy with a Sharpie on his face stuck in a chimney. Crime requires planning, agility, and a basic understanding of physics, traits that, fortunately for society, these individuals completely lacked. So, the next time you lock your door at night, rest easy. If anyone tries to break in, there's a statistical probability they'll fall asleep on your couch or get sat on by your dog before they steal a dime.